Me. Come on. There we go. Can you see?
Yes.
Ready to go?
Right? Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Local Law 97 webinar for Houses of Worship. My name is Martine Wilkinson. I am a Climate Corps Fellow at National Grid and will be assisting in today's webinar. Before we begin, I'd just like to go over a couple things. First, please keep your microphones muted throughout the webinar to help with the clarity and understanding of each presentation. And second, please utilize the chat feature in Teams to submit any questions you may have. We will have a Q&A session at the very end to address all your inquiries. With that said, I'd like to introduce Carla Hunter Ramsey, Director of External Affairs and Community Engagement at National Grid. She will be kicking off today's event and moderating the discussion. Carla, over to you.
Thank you so much, Martine. The Bible says in the book of Proverbs, chapter 11, where there is no counsel, the people fail, but where there's a multitude of counsel, there is safety. And that's what we've done today. We've come together, the Office of the Brooklyn Borough President, the Mayor's Office of Faith-Based and Community Partnerships, the New York City Accelerator, and National Grid to help share information about Local Law 97 with Houses of Worship. And I'm honored to serve in this capacity as a faith-based liaison from National Grid in order to be a part of this very informative webinar. So with that, I'm going to ask the Deputy Borough President, Kim Council, to please bring greetings from the Brooklyn Borough President's Office. Next slide.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you all for being here today. Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Kim Council, the Deputy Borough President. I bring you greetings on behalf of our Borough President, the Honorable Antonio Reynoso. As we know, well, maybe we don't know, Local Law 97 was passed in 2019. It was part of Mayor de Blasio's Green New Deal. It was an unparalleled commitment to address the reality of increasing the sustainability of New York City's buildings by reducing building emissions. It sets limits on greenhouse gas emissions, and we understand that faith-based houses of worship may be adversely impacted by this law, and I believe that forewarned is forearmed. So I ran into Carla Ramsey at a panel, at a ribbon cutting in Brownsville, and she asked me about this, and we began a conversation that has led us to be here today. So we've gathered together a group of experts and partners in order to inform our constituents about Local Law 97 in order to begin the conversation and inform you on what you need to do in order to be in compliance. So I want to give a special thank you to our partners who are here today, which is the New York City Mayor's Office, Faith-Based and Community Engagement, to National Grid, of course, for all of their hard work in putting this program together, to the New York City Accelerator for all that they've done in order to put this webinar in place, and also to the Neighborhood Technical Assistance Corporation for all of the work that they do with nonprofits all throughout the city. So thank you all for being here today. Sit back, relax, and enjoy our webinar.
Thank you, Reverend Kim. I'm going to take you all through the agenda, and thank you for a reminder. I'm also an ordained reverend with the African Methodist Episcopal denomination, and I am with the Greater Allen AME Church. So thank you for, when you are working, sometimes the hat of reverend doesn't always come to the forefront, but in this setting, absolutely. And so we've just heard from the Deputy Borough President from Brooklyn, and I will take you through the rest of the agenda before I turn it over to Elijah Hutchinson, who will bring greetings from the Mayor's Office. And then I'll take you through an overview of National Grid, then followed by Aisha Ali and Laura Perano from the New York City Accelerator, who will talk about understanding Local Law 97 and financing options. Then we'll go to Lou Rizzo from National Grid, who's the manager of customer energy solutions. And then we have what we thought was going to be really, really helpful to really have you understand some testimonials. So we have Amy Schwach, who's the executive director of Temple Shura Tefila, who will talk about her experience. And then we have Heidi Swanson, who's the Director of Compliance for the Rockland Asset Corp for the Diocese of Brooklyn. And then we'll go into Q&A. So with that, if you'll go advance the slide one, Pastor Guilford Monroe, unfortunately, had a lot going on his agenda, but that's okay because he has come from with a person in his office who's able to help and assist and give some information that's important. So Elijah Hutchinson should be on the line and who can talk from the Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. Elijah?
Hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation to be here today and to speak with this particular community of people. Also want to thank just the Accelerator, Con Ed, National Grid, and others who have just been providing a ton of support and resources to help us spread the word and get as much information out there as we can about our decarbonization efforts in Local Law 97. I'm the executive director of the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, and we call ourselves MOCEJ. And MOCEJ is excited to be a part of this all-government collaborative approach on local law 97 mobilization, or what we call getting 97 done. Um, as um, as was mentioned, Local Law 97 was part of something called the Climate Mobilization Act. And this was one of the biggest, boldest pieces of climate mobilization legislation in the world. And the city council passed it in 2019. And what that means for New York City, because we are already a very efficient place in a lot of different ways. We ride subways, we live in smaller spaces than our American counterparts. What it means in order for us to become efficient is that we have to focus on our building stock. Buildings account for over 70% of the emissions in New York City. And what Local Law 97 does is that it requires 50 large buildings over 50,000 square feet to cut its emissions 40% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. I say that because we have our buildings goals, but we also have goals in all sectors across this economy. And our overall goal for New York City and for New York State is to be entirely carbon neutral by 2050. To get there, by 2040, our goal is to be running on 100% renewable energy, and we have active projects to connect to hydropower in Canada, to offshore wind off our coasts. But this is really transformational work that we're engaging in right now and the conversation that we're having today, and which is why it's so important for us to have a strategy and a message and to have these kinds of conversations across all of these sectors so that we can give you all the tools and resources you need to be in compliance with these climate laws so that you're not subject to those fines and you're able to do the retrofits and be in compliance with the requirements of the legislation. Well, I'm sure you will have a lot of questions throughout the presentation itself. It's really great to hear firsthand from people within your communities who have started to do this work and the challenges and the resources that they found. But our answers to lots of questions will be to go to New York City Accelerator. NYC Accelerator is the free one-stop shop resource that is a partnership with us in the government to make sure that you have reliable, incredible information, and they will work with you soup to nuts on trying to work out what your building, and you can be a building manager, you can be a building owner, to reach out to to the accelerator, get answers to your questions, and learn about, if you're interested in integrating renewables in your retrofits or solar panels or anything like that. The accelerator is truly your resource to go to answer your questions, and they'll do so on an individual basis as they set up accounts with you. So that is a big part of our strategy with the private sector, with churches. Us as a city, under the laws that were passed and in 2019, we have even stricter mandates to achieve energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emission reductions than the private sector. And we've actually been able to, in the last 15 years or so, reduce almost 26% of our greenhouse gas emissions, which is the equivalent of removing over 80,000 cars from the city streets. Just to highlight some of the things that we're doing with our portfolio of energy conservation measures, it includes installing solar on city properties, where we've been able to meet almost 80% of our solar goals by installing solar on a roof of city public schools in New York City. And when we released the strategic plan for New York City with getting sustainability done and getting stuff done, we did it on one of the largest solar arrays on top of a public school. This is just to say that there's a lot going on within this climate space, and this work is absolutely transformational, and it is not easy work to do. And so we want to make sure you all have the resources to really get there and be in compliance with these ambitious targets. But I really want to thank our hosts, the Borough President's Office, and our utility partners who are helping us coordinate through this transition. And I won't be at the end for Q&A, unfortunately, but if you have any questions or would like to speak to me further, anyone on this team will know how to reach me. So please reach out, and I appreciate you giving us the space to introduce myself and give that broader context for why we're here today.
Thank you so much, Elijah. And as you all will hear, even through my presentation, some of the numbers and how National Grid is looking to address these numbers, I thank you. There'll be a little bit of a tie. So with that, I'd like to take you through a brief overview of National Grid. And so if you go to the next slide. So it's all about building a smarter, stronger, cleaner, and more equitable energy future. That's what our goal is as we go into this clean energy future together. And so, next slide. National Grid realizes its vision every day to our 4.2 million customers that we serve throughout the state of New York, where we are delivering natural gas and electricity safely, reliably, and cost effectively to continually meet the needs. And I don't know if you are aware of just how many customers we actually have. So just a couple of numbers to highlight on here. We've got 1.7 million electric customers, about 2.5 million gas customers, and this is being supported by over 10,000 employees and over 4.5 union employees. So we have a very large organization that is set up to help in this energy transition, to make sure that we are doing it in a way that is fair, affordable, and clean. So you will keep hearing this drumbeat of it being affordable, making sure we're not leaving anybody behind in this transition. So if we take it to the next slide, please. Now, there's a few things that I think are important. Here at home in New York State, we have some of the most aggressive climate policies in the country, right? These are things that are already under the way, and we understand the role that utilities play. We're critical and we're strategic in the role the state is making in order to help fulfill its commitments to the customers that we have up and down the state of New York. And so we've got things that we're looking at by putting a bold, clean energy vision to help achieve the state's clean energy goals. And we've got a way forward in order to do this. So we understand some of the goals that were mentioned before by Elijah. In order to do this, these are very aggressive goals. We have to be able to deliver 70% renewable energy by 2030, 100% zero emissions in our electricity by 2040. We have to be able to enable deployment of new electrified end-use technologies and clean resources and provide an individualized, seamless, and improved experience for our customers. And I probably would say through all of that, that is really the bedrock on how we're going to do this. We understand that trying to do this in a seamless way, something that's brand new for all utilities to experience, we're all on this journey together, but we're all making sure that while we're doing this, that we're trying to make it an improved experience for customers at the end of the day. Let's go to the next slide. So we have our clean energy vision. And as I mentioned before, it's all about affordability, but then it's about customer choice, right? And we want to make sure that you have choice as we go through this process. National Grid is investing billions in our networks to help build capacity, drive energy efficiency, reduce emissions, and move us towards net zero. And doing this in our clean energy vision, we're looking at affordability and customer choice. We're looking at advancing our smart electrification. So it is about developing a smarter, stronger, and cleaner electric network of the future of heat that delivers energy equitably where and when it's needed. And then it's about decarbonizing our energy system and making sure that we decarbonize the existing pipeline distribution network to help achieve our climate goals while maintaining reliability, which is critical. And we do this by working with our legislators and our regulators on sound, orderly energy policies that give you greater choice and ensure affordability and reliability into the future. Next slide, please. So we have 4 policy priorities that lead to action, right? At National Grid, we're accelerating our electric system modernization and expansion to connect renewables and enable electrification of transportation and heating. At National Grid, we lead with our values and foster one of the most inclusive, diverse, equitable, and ethical cultures of the New York company with a workforce that's leading the energy transition in order to support these priorities. We're expanding our energy efficiency strategies and programs to increase customer adoption and help decarbonize all homes and businesses. And it's important that while I know that you have the slides, you will get the slides, but a lot of this is new language for many people, right? And understanding that hearing what I'm saying and you reading it and being able to take it in is going to be important as you go through this transition to understand what this really means for the foreseeable future. So the third one is around implementing new policies to decarbonize heat for our buildings and industries to enable innovative clean energy options. Again, it's all about customer choice. And then about ensuring our families and businesses can afford. So where affordability is key, that they can afford the energy bills with more easily accessible and available energy savings and assistance programs. So we know that houses of worship, you generally operate large, generally older buildings, and you have an opportunity to both decrease your carbon footprint by energy efficiency, but you also play a role. And I don't want you to forget this, that you play a role in helping to shape the energy policy. So it's important for National Grid to understand your particular circumstances. And it's important that your elected leaders understand and know what they are and what that impact is to the local, on any local and state laws that have an impact on your congregation, so that we can ensure that we create laws that are orderly and that provide affordability and leave no one behind as we push out more energy policies. So consider National Grid your utility partner for energy efficiency programs, which you will hear from Lou Rizzo shortly, to help you manage your energy footprint. And we absolutely look forward to working with you and understanding your specific needs. So with that, we are going to now turn to the New York Accelerator. So Aisha Ali and Laura Prano will take us through understanding Local Law 97 and financing. Aisha?
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. Next slide, please. So Laura and I are here today. We're both account managers from NYC Accelerator, and we're here to discuss Local Law 97 and houses of worship. Next slide, please. So a quick agenda of what we're going to be discussing today. I'm going to be going over an introduction to what NYC Accelerator is, and then Local Law 97, an overview, the different compliance pathways for houses of worship, energy saving opportunities, incentives, as well as financing options. Next slide, please. So what exactly is NYC Accelerator? It's a free New York City program to help control costs, meet compliance requirements for local laws, boost building performance, and increase energy savings. So we offer free technical guidance, help you identify any building upgrade projects that you may have in mind. If you have any pain points in your building, we'll help connect you with service providers that can implement projects. And we also have a free training center as well on our website. We also have financing specialists on board that can help identify applicable financial incentives and provide financing assistance. Next slide, please. So how exactly does it work? Any building that's over 5,000 square feet is eligible, and you can either visit our website and call us, and then you'll get a dedicated account manager assigned to you. There's no cost, no catch or sign up or commitment of any sort, and we're kind of here to hold your hand through the whole process of implementing decarbonization projects. Next slide, please. Local Law 97, we're going to go into different local laws and what exactly emissions are. Next slide, please. So this may be the first time that you're hearing about emissions, reducing emissions. What does that mean, right? So emissions are gases or particles that are put into the air or emitted. So like Elijah mentioned, buildings account for almost 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions for New York City. So reducing building emissions will result in better air quality. And not all emissions are the same. So oil emissions, gas emissions, and electric emissions are all different. Oil is considered quote unquote like dirtier, as well as gas. And then we have electricity, which we're leaning towards. We're trying to electrify the grid. On the left, there are a few local laws that you may or may not have heard of. The first is Local Law 84, which refers to benchmarking. That's the annual submission of your energy usage data. There are free resources available from the Sustainability Help Center that can also help you submit your benchmarking report that you can take advantage of. Next is Local Law 95, which are the letter ratings that are based off of your benchmarking score. You might have seen them while you were walking around. There are letter grades outside of buildings, and they're based off of the benchmarking score. Local Law 88 deals with lighting, and it's making buildings over 25,000 square feet have to comply with Local Law 88. It's making sure that your lighting is up to code. For Local Law 87, that deals with energy audits and retrocommissioning. So every buildings over 50,000 square feet must submit an energy audit once every 10 years. And retro-commissioning is making sure that all of your building systems are working properly and everything is up to code. Next slide, please. So next we can dive into Local Law 97. So buildings over 25,000 square feet are subject to Local Law 97. This includes houses of worship and landmark buildings. So the first carbon emissions limit will be applied from 2024 to 2029, and then the second carbon emissions limit will be applied from 2030 to 2034. The goal is to reduce the emissions produced by the city's largest buildings 40% by 2030 and to get to zero by 2050. So if you see the graph that's on the right here, you can see that the carbon emissions limits, they drop as the years progress. So the goal is to eventually get to zero by 2050. Next slide, please. So Department of Buildings they released covered buildings lists for Local Law 97 and for Article 321 and delayed compliance. So Article 321 just refers to the prescriptive pathway, which is another pathway that affordable housing buildings and houses of worship may be eligible for you. So you can see that we circled that on the Department of Buildings website over here. So when the buildings on a BBL together meet 50,000 square feet, all the buildings on that BBL are subject to Local Law 97. However, each building on that BBL must comply with the appropriate requirements for said building. And BBL just refers to building, block, and lot number. So you can use your building's BBL to see if you are on any of these covered buildings list, or you can contact us and we'll look that up for you. Next slide, please. So here are the different compliance options for houses of worship. You have the prescriptive pathway and the performance pathway. So for the prescriptive pathway, you would have to install the applicable prescriptive energy conservation measures by December 31st, 2024. And for the performance pathway, you would have to demonstrate that your building emissions are below the 2030 Local Law 97 emissions limit by December 31st, 2024. Now, for both pathways, you're required to submit an energy compliant buildings emissions report by May 1st, 2025. Next slide, please. So if you're leaning towards the performance pathway, this is a great place to start. This is the Building Energy Snapshot tool that was developed by NYC Accelerator. These are a few things to keep in mind. You can see that the building, block, and lot number is listed for this address, and you can see the square footage is also circled. So that has an impact on your penalties. You want to make sure that's as accurate as possible. And then you can also see the number of buildings on the lot and the projected Local Law 97 annual penalty. Now, this projection is based off of your benchmarking data. So you can see that this building actually does not have any penalties from 24 to 2029, but it does have almost $85,000 worth of penalties from 2030 to 2034. So it's just dependent on your building, the number of buildings on the lot, your square footage, what the building use type is. So I would recommend either going onto the website and typing in your address, or you can contact us and then we can also look it up for you. Next slide, please. So here are a list of the Article 321 prescriptive measures. So there are 13 applicable prescriptive measures. 9 of the prescriptive measures require attestations, and 4 of the highlighted measures require detailed inspection reports because they have a higher energy impact. Now, some of these measures are things that you may be already completing for the general maintenance of your building. Things like repairing any heating system leaks, insulating all the pipes for heating or hot water, upgrading your lighting, weatherizing or air sealing to prevent maybe any draftiness, making sure that rooms aren't overheated or underheated in specific rooms. So I would recommend just making sure to see which ones you would have to comply with. Next slide, please. So Department of Buildings has released the prescriptive pathway filing guide, or the Article 321 filing guide, recently. So you can see over here, this is one of the prescriptive measures, the temperature set points. So it goes in depth with all of the prescriptive measures, why it's necessary, and the requirements for each. On the right is another page from the filing guide, which gives you an example of which measures you would have to complete based off of your heating system in your building. So let's say you have a one-pipe steam building, then you can see that you won't have to do radiator temperature controls or steam traps. Those are two measures that you won't be subject to. They're not applicable for your building. So it just depends on the heating system. And we have that linked as well. Next slide, please. Here are a few penalty mitigation opportunities. The first is an unexpected or unforeseen event. Now, this refers to anything like a fire or flooding, anything that happens to your building, like a natural disaster. The next is an eligible energy conservation project, but that applies more for affordable housing buildings, so I'm going to skip over that. And the next is a mediated resolution. So let's say you decide that you want to go towards the prescriptive pathway, and it's December 31st, 2024, and you're not able to complete all of the applicable prescriptive energy conservation measures. So you would go into a contract with Department of Buildings and decide upon a date together on when you can complete all of the measures by, and that's an opportunity to mitigate the penalties. I do want to make note of the two penalties. So there's a penalty if you have a failure to submit the building's emissions report, that has a $10,000 penalty, and a failure to meet either compliance option also has a $10,000 penalty. So I want to make sure that we're submitting the report by May 1st, 2025, and choosing either compliance option. Next slide, please. So here's a timeline. We are currently in 2024 where the emissions limits begin. And then the deadline for the prescriptive path, as well as the performance path to get underneath the emissions, is December 31st, 2024. The first compliance report is due May 1st, 2025, and that can be submitted either by a registered design professional or a retro-commissioning agent. Next slide, please. So here are a few of the deadlines that I mentioned previously, as well as I want to make note that you might have multiple occupancy groups on your site. Sometimes houses of worship, they might have a preschool or a daycare attached to their building. If that's the case and you still want to go towards the prescriptive pathway, you want to make sure that the building has greater than or equal to 50% of the building classified as A-3 religious house of worship. That means that you are eligible for the prescriptive pathway. This can also be confirmed with a registered design professional or a retro commissioning agent. Next slide, please. Next, I want to hand it over to Laura to go over incentives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Once you've worked with an account manager at the New York City Accelerator, you're going to better understand how these local laws apply to your specific building, and they'll work with you to understand the energy conservation measures that are required for compliance. If you're not compelled to comply with Local Law 97, you can still contact the accelerator and we'll help you understand energy savings throughout the building and the incentives that are and other resources that are available for those energy related upgrades. Next slide, please. So some tips on navigating incentives. These are resources available to help pay for the upgrade costs. And I know that many houses of worship are used to receiving grants that might cover the entire cost. So these are resources that help pay, but usually not for the entire upfront cost of a measure. And when you contact the New York City Accelerator, we can help you determine your eligibility for just the right incentive program, whether you live in Brooklyn or elsewhere across the city. And for houses of worship, you're going to fall into either two programs, the commercial and industrial program or the small, medium, or small business program. It's really important to note that you need to follow the protocol for applying for an incentive. This usually is required prior to any work starting, and you need to have your eligibility verified. There's usually pre-inspection visits to the site, and you'll receive a letter to proceed from the utility company to take advantage of these incentives. And to note, these programs change throughout the year. We see bonuses, limited time offers. Some are neighborhood specific, some have adders, so that if you complete the requirements in a particular incentive and you do additional work, there's additional incentive available. And they work differently than tax incentives, rebates, and abatements. So these are incentives from utility companies and the state. And so they're all different types of resources to take advantage. In general, most of the utility incentives are taken by the contractors, and they're calculated either by the amount of energy saved or by a project measure. In multifamily buildings, they'd be calculated in some instances per unit. Next slide, please. So this is a sample of the incentives for houses of worship. One of the most popular incentives that we have at the accelerator for houses of worship is the NYSERDA Green Jobs Green New York Energy Audit. And this is a deeply discounted incentive. And this report will provide you a review of all the energy use in your building, recommended measures, payback period. It's based on the number of full-time staff you have at your house of worship. Normally costs thousands of dollars, but it's generally $100 to $300 in cost in total. The Con Ed Instant Lighting program is also a great program to take advantage. It's a discount program for eligible LED lighting. And you work with a participating contractor to take advantage of that. NYSERDA is another state program that has incentives for heat pumps. And this one is very attractive. It can be stacked with other incentives, which are particularly generous in 2024. Another state program is called the New York Sun Solar Program, and that's for solar PV panels. This is an incentive paid to the installer to reduce upfront costs. So that's something that many houses of worship have taken advantage in our program. The other category is utility incentives. As I mentioned, the small, medium business or commercial and industrial incentives. And these are specific to the energy upgrade. So it could be for steam traps, insulation, windows. It could be for a new boiler or other upgrades, and they're specific to that type of upgrade and available from both Con Ed and National Grid. And I'll let Lou Rizzo provide more information on those from National Grid. Next slide, please. So direct pay, I just wanted to mention this. This is brand new for houses of worship and other nonprofits. We have an entire New York City Accelerator solar team to provide guidance. You can get a free solar feasibility study, which will spec out the system and identify all applicable incentives, including tax incentives. And the direct pay is brand new. It's part of the IRA funding package. And what this allows you to do is take advantage of the investment tax credit normally reserved for taxpayers for qualifying clean energy projects. This includes solar and geothermal, and it's for up to 30% of the installed system cost. And this involves a series of steps which begin with pre-filing registration with the IRS. So you would get a tax ID number with the IRS, and these are awarded to the tax-exempt owner of the solar installation. So that's different than the New York Sun program, which goes directly to the installer. This will go to the tax-exempt owner of the installation itself. Next slide, please. So once you've decided what your scope of work will be or is required to be for Local Law 97, and you've identified the incentive resources, you may be interested in finding financing. Next slide, please. So the financing assistance with the New York City Accelerator is very customized. We'll meet with you and we'll learn about your specific energy upgrade project, the scope, the type of building, and consider your financials. If you have a mortgage, where are you in that status and cycle of payment, your reserves, any income? We work with many houses of worship, so we understand the income involves capital campaigns and donations, and then your preferences for repayment, whether that you're looking for short-term financing or long-term financing. And one of the reasons why people do reach out to us for financing energy upgrades is that they'd like to preserve their building reserves for other uses, which is important because many houses of worship really need to rely on those resources to repair things that break and cover general operating costs. And when you finance a energy upgrade, there are instances where, particularly if the upgrade is substantial, that your energy savings throughout the year may be actually greater than the payment for the loan, which will result in net cash flow. Next slide, please. So the finance team assistance, essentially, we're going to identify the finance options for you for that specific type of upgrade and scope of work. We'll review financials and your preferences for repayment. And then we introduce you to the capital providers. And then once you meet with as many as you like, we'll review offers with you, the term sheets, payment options. We can provide assistance with calculating and comparing what the repayment would look like for the entire length of the loan. And then we let you and the lenders take it from there through the application process when you complete financing. And then we do ask that you stay in touch. Next slide, please. So there are many different types of financing options available for houses of worship. If you don't have a green mortgage, this is a possible option that you may decide to take out a mortgage, or if you have one, you can refinance with a green mortgage and roll those energy upgrades into that financing. There are energy service agreements and power purchase agreements, and these are types of options where it requires no upfront cost. So if you're really cash constrained, this may work for you. And these are contracts between you and an energy service company or installer or developer. And they install these upgrades, whether it's energy efficiency or clean energy. And then you enter into a contract to repay that. So that's not a mortgage, it's not a lien on the property, it's a separate service contract. So that may work for some of you, particularly if you have a portfolio of house of worship buildings. In fact, we're working with one in New York City right now with a large portfolio of buildings and we're meeting with 2 of those as a service providers. There are also equipment loans and leases. These are offered by third-party lenders and equipment manufacturers with also no upfront costs or maintenance fees. Next slide, please. We also have an option called the New York City PACE financing. So PACE is a program that houses of worship can participate in. Just because you're not paying property taxes right now, It doesn't mean you can't participate in PACE. Everyone actually has a tax ID number with New York City, anyone who owns a building. So what this is an option to finance efficiency and clean energy upgrades through a line item on a property tax bill. So you'd receive one after getting these loans. And this can provide up to 100% financing. There is a minimum loan size. The lenders do like to see loans for substantial renovation or upgrades. So they're limited to loan sizes of 500,000 and up. We have over a dozen PACE lenders. Some of them specialize in working with nonprofits and houses of worship. Next slide, please. We have additional financing options. This is just a few. We work very closely with NYSEG, which is the New York City Energy Efficiency Corporation. It's a nonprofit lender, and there are quite a few different financing products that are available up to 15 years, including pre-development loans. We have Inclusive Prosperity Capital, another nonprofit lender that has a very popular Catalyst loan with terms up to 20 years to finance these projects. This one is important to note because up to 25% of the loan proceeds can be used for to finance health and safety measures. So you can bundle those together and stretch out the payments for over 20 years so that your payment is lower month to month. And there are no prepayment penalties with either NYSEG or IPC loans. Right now, as I mentioned, with incentives or financing, there's always a limited time offer. And right now, Con Ed is offering a subsidized loan with Verdant Capital. And these are shorter term loans. So your payment would be larger every month, but if that's a good fit for your financing, there are target interest rates that begin at 0% and up to 5.59% for 84 months. This is very time limited. You have to get your application in before June 30th, not the work being completed, but the application in for that financing. And those rates are based on how much Con Ed incentives have been applied to that program. So these are target interest rates, not de facto interest rates. And then energy as a service providers that I had mentioned, including Noresco, Endurant, Metris, and so on, great for portfolio-wide upgrades. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? What can you do? If you need assistance, contact the New York City Accelerator. You're not going to get a different person on the phone every time you reach us. It'll be a dedicated account manager to help you understand these compliance requirements that you may have. We'll help identify opportunities to save energy and confirm your eligibility for all these incentive programs. There are actually over 70 of them in New York State alone. So it's a great assistance to navigate these different programs. You can utilize our service provider network. That's important because in the search in the service provider website, you can see if they're participating providers for the incentive programs. Many of them have that requirement, and it's good to know in advance if you can take advantage of those incentives with that service provider. And then if you're interested and you need financing, you can meet with the finance team and we'll introduce you to lenders. If you just want to know that financing exists for decarbonization projects, you're welcome to reach out and contact us. We'll set up a meeting and provide an overview of your options, or you can come to us once you've decided what your scope of work will be, and then we'll help you throughout that process. And that way you can make an informed decision about what capital improvements you're making. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. And here is our contact information. And I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Laura and Aisha, what a wealth of information that you shared from New York City Accelerator. And I know that those who are on the call will need a moment to go through it again. I put a note in the chat, and thank you. I see questions are coming in. We're going to address those questions when we get towards the end of the presentation. So please continue to put your questions in the chat, and we'll come back. I will just have you know that Aisha and Laura, this one might pertain to you since you just finished your presentation. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to Lou Rizzo, who is from National Grid, and he's the manager of Customer Energy Solutions. Lou?
Great. Thank you, Carla. Next slide, please. So I want to be speaking about the National Grid energy efficiency programs that are available for multifamily, commercial, industrial customers, and the customers that, then I'll cover a little bit more about the different types of programs and services that we have through National Grid. Next slide, please. And so National Grid offers a gamut of different energy efficiency type programs. The type of programs that are available that we're going to be covering today, as indicated, will be for commercial programs, commercial multifamily programs that are available. Just want to note too that religious organizations are on residential heating rate codes, but they're eligible for all our commercial programs underneath the National Grid. So that's why we're going to be talking about the commercial programs, because as a religious organizations, they're going to be eligible for our programs as well. And also too, our programs are eligible for existing gas heating customers, temperature controlled customers, new construction customers, and customers that are looking to convert to natural gas. Next slide, please. The type of programs that National Grid offers, we offer what we call custom programs, where we have a set, where we screen the project to determine the eligibility, and we set different incentive amounts. We also offer direct install programs where we have various vendors go out to install various types of measures, aerators, shower heads, and so forth for commercial customers. And for multifamily customers, right now we're limiting it to steam traps, because we used to do free measures for multifamily. Now we're just limiting it to steam traps. We also have a weatherization program where we offer various incentives for customers that do weatherization type work, roof insulation, and so forth. Next slide, please. And the other type of programs that we currently have, we have a demand response program where we have a number of customers that are high volume customers that are looking to do load curtailment during peak load winter days. So, customers get incentives for reducing their load during peak hours of demand, where especially when it gets really cold outside, it gets 15 to 10 degrees outside. We're looking for some load curtailment and some volunteers and customers that sign up to the program, and they get paid incentives for load curtailment during those peak times. Underneath our programs too, we offer a low income affordability program called the AIMI program, where we offer various types of incentives for buildings that are classified as low affordable type housing for multifamily buildings. Next slide, please.
Lou, just multifamily, is it more than 5 units?
Sorry, yes, multifamily is greater than 5 units or more, would be classified as multifamily housing. So let me, so the next, underneath our custom programs itself, our custom programs are give incentives of $2 per therm saved. That's where we look at various types of measures within the building itself. We assess what the savings would be, and we can pay up to 70% of the cost with a cap of $150,000 on projects. A lot of times, it includes a gamut of different types of measures when you're looking at custom. It can be custom combustion controls, energy management system, what they call thermal blankets, heat recovery, and the list goes on. And depending on the types of equipment that you currently have, the incentives will vary quite significantly depending on the magnitude of estimated savings. Those projects require pre-approval. We need to know about the project before it starts itself. And that way we determine what the energy savings are, because we're going to have to do an evaluation on those projects to determine what the savings are. And then we send the customers an offer letter indicating how much you're going to save and the incentive amount associated with that project that we can provide you when the project is completed. And these are one-time incentives that we're going to be covering through National Grid. These are one-time. They're not reoccurring. They're one-time incentives that we offer through our energy efficiency programs. Next slide, please. Through our direct install program for commercial customers, which include restaurants, restaurant facilities, nursing homes, hospitals, and so forth, we offer low flow shower heads, spray valves, aerators, and for salons, we give salon spray valves, pipe insulation in some cases. In some cases, we'll also do some thermostats as well. So it's a nice program for direct install. We've worked with a number of religious organizations where we've replaced a lot of the shower heads and aerators in different religious schools, and also different organizations. Next slide, please. Through our income affordable housing program, which is 5 units or greater in order to participate. And also too, they have to identify and show us, provide us indicating a rent roll that shows that classifies that you're classified as a low income affordable building itself. We offer 2 covered paths with those types of housing, which is a comprehensive path, which includes you get a points up to 100 points, and there's a list of different measures that could classify. Or if you do a non-comprehensive, it doesn't have to add up to a minimum of 100 points. You can do individual measures, and there's incentives available. And it does help the buildings to comply with local law 97. So everything that I'm covering today, the different types of measures, incentives, can help buildings to comply with local law 97 because it helps reduce your overall energy usage and your carbon emissions. Next slide, please. Through our weatherization program itself, we offer incentives up to $17 per therm saved for insulation, air sealing, attic and roof wall insulation, replacement of doors and windows itself. So this it's been a really good program for a lot of customers that helps to reduce the cost when installing or insulating the building itself to make it more efficient. This is a great saver and also one of the key prescriptive items for local law 97 on the Article 321. This is a good program to participate in because it does help reduce quite a bit of the incremental cost when installing the different measures to insulate to make the building envelope of the building more tighter. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show just a summary of some of the case studies and things that we've worked with in different organizations. We work with the Brooklyn Yeshiva, and when we did a window replacement project we're doing right now with them, we're giving incentives around $7,700. They're going to save it annually about 453 therms a year. Another one, we work with an Episcopal church in Queens, where they did a number of different measures, but included from boiler replacements, controls, water replacement, heat, pipe insulation, and so forth. Total incentives around $156,000. We gave them an energy saving around 78,000 therms a year. What that equates to a therm a year, think of it about $1 per therm. So they're going to save consistently $78,000 a year on a consistent basis. We've also worked quite a bit with the Brooklyn Diocese on a number of different projects, which include boiler replacement, pipe insulation, roof insulation, windows, steam traps, and other types of measures. The incentives, the total of incentives, roughly around $372,000, when they have a total estimated annual savings around 91,000 therms, which is a nice savings for different religious organizations that we're doing. So this just want to show you the different types of, it doesn't matter whether it's a small little facility or a larger facility doing multiple different measures. There's always potential savings, and there's incentives available for you to help reduce those costs when improving the building. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we have is I listed out the different types of ways to reach us as a company. You can see information about all our programs on our website at ngrid.com/EE. To get information on all our weatherization program, you can contact us directly at energyefficiency@nationalgrid.com or contact Michael Harrison at National Grid to get information on the weatherization programs for religious organizations. We have information on direct install if you want to just contact the vendor directly, and they can set up an appointment for them to come out to assess and to replace a number of different measures to put in low flow measures for the religious organizations. So I just want to put some contact information just to make it easier for you to get there, to get information on all these programs and more. So next slide, please. Okay, that's all I got on mine. I try to make it short and sweet because I know we wanted to get as quickly as can to the our guest speakers here to cover more information from them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lou. The information that you provided, everyone, you'll get a copy of this as well, so that in case you weren't able to get a screenshot of it, so that you'd be able to reach out and learn what program is best for you for National Grid. So we are coming to the end, but I am excited that we have two testimonials. So Amy Schwach is going to speak first, and she's the executive director from Temple Shirei Tefela. And then the second speaker is going to be, next slide. Real quick. Thank you. Heidi Swanson, who is the Director of Compliance for the Rockland Asset Corp for the Diocese of Brooklyn. So let's first turn it over to Amy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists on this call, and particular thanks to the New York City Accelerators Office and Aisha in particular, who helped us figure out which pathway to take. And I'll talk a little bit about the prescriptive pathway, which is what Temple Shirei Tefela is doing to get compliant with Local Law 97. Next screen, please. Next slide. Thank you. Next slide. That's our building outside on 79th Street and 2nd Avenue. Next slide, please. So as Aisha mentioned earlier, you're probably already doing many of the things that are on the list to lead you to compliance. Or you've already have them done. So this is just an example of LED lighting that we installed throughout the building. We were already retrofitting our lighting and had been working on that for some time and doing it floor by floor. And that's part of the prescriptive measures. And so that's a first sort of low-hanging fruit thing that you can do. And I see on this webinar, we've learned about a myriad of different ways to get that accomplished and get help from local agencies. Next slide, please. A couple more instances of things, examples of things that we were able to achieve that we were already working on just in regular maintenance, routine maintenance of the building. Radiator thermostat controls for heating and cooling. This may look familiar to many of you in your buildings. Next slide, please. Steam traps, heat trap bleeders, and heat and hot water controls for boilers also may look very familiar to you. These are, again, all things that we already were working on and had working as part of the steam system in our building. There are 13 lists on the, no, thank you, go ahead, you can go to the next slide. There are 13 items on the prescriptive pathway. Again, many of them you've already done. And so some of the lessons that I learned and that Shirei Tefela has learned about this process is identify trusted partners. You really need to figure out if Local Law 97 applies to your organization. If your building is over 25,000 feet, square feet, it applies. And it's really important because I will tell you that many of my colleagues and I thought that this would not apply to us because we're a nonprofit religious institution. And so it's really important that you recognize that this probably does apply to you if your building is over 25,000 square feet, and you need to start sort of working on your compliance. So if it does apply, which pathway to compliance should you choose? The New York City Accelerators Office, as I mentioned, is wonderful and really super helpful. Create a checklist of projects to get you in compliance. And so again, from everything we've learned in this webinar and some of the websites that have been mentioned, there's an easy way to get a list of the pathways for each and a list of all the projects for each list to compliance. Meet with your staff and your vendors to walk through the list so everyone understands the process and their role in it. I did work with one of a local architect to help us walk through and make sure all of the things that we needed to do, we understood what they were and that we could walk through them. And some of our staff helped implement those things with vendors. It was me and my maintenance staff and a whole team of people. Talk to your colleagues, really important. Talk to the people around you who are doing what you're doing in like institutions. And many of the people on this webinar are also super helpful. You're not alone in this work. We're all trying to get to the same goal. Ask for help from your colleagues who are working on this. And so I very often, when I've learned about these webinars and been super happy to be part of them, learning like you guys are now, I was able to call my colleagues and say, hey, what are you doing? Is there somebody that you're using for this that you like? How are the things, what's the process that you've entered into to make sure that you get to compliance? But you're not alone in doing this. Participate in all the webinars, calls, and meetings that you possibly can that can offer guidance and create opportunities to meet people who can help you, that you can ask for help. And so that's really, I think the most important one. I learned all about Local Law 97 from a webinar just like this that Aisha was also on. And I'm very grateful to have been participating so I could learn all these things. And I met Aisha and I was able to ask for help in figuring out which was the best pathway for us.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for including us.
You're quite welcome. And so pictures, one picture says 1,000 words. So I'm so appreciative of both you and Heidi sharing pictures of some of the projects that you've done. And so with that, let me turn it to Heidi Swanson, who will take us through her experience.
Thanks, Carla. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, thanks. So the Diocese of Brooklyn, we operate out of Brooklyn and Queens. We have 180 parishes and we have 1,100 buildings. We probably will end up doing about 85 to 100 local law 97 filings next year. So we're deep in the midst of it. But I will say it all starts with local law 84 and benchmarking your properties. We've been doing it for a number of years, and I would reiterate what Amy had said about finding a trusted partner. When we started most of our benchmarking, we had an organization that we used, and we've kind of grown with them as the law has grown. But it was very helpful to have that vendor work with us through some of the things, the challenges that I'll share with you now. Aisha, I think, had mentioned that there's the 320 pathway and the 321. The 321, of course, is the prescriptive pathway or the one for houses of worship. But you see on the picture that I showed here, our parishes, and one parish, each parish is a corporation, but our parish here has multiple buildings, and it's pretty typical to be on a city block, and you'll have a church and a parochial school and a convent and a rectory. Those are all kind of typical, but they're all part of one BBL, a building block and lot. So we have to file them together for local law 84. And in 97, we'll have to separate those out because they'll have distinct pathways. The church will have to go on prescriptive measures if they don't meet the 2030 emissions levels. The school is a different utilization type. It has to follow the 320 pathway. And you'll see by that yellow circle that the gym and the rectory, they share utility bills. So even though that rectory is on a different block and lot, we have to pull it into one filing, and we have to file that as a bundle. Then that's called a campus environment in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So the first challenge we had, and I don't think your buildings may not be that different. You have multiple buildings, different utilization, and you have to understand how to file, how you would have to file them. One of the biggest things we came up with initially is that we had a lot of data discrepancies. So they take a lot of time and effort to address, and we filed over years so we could see how our energy worked from one year to another to another. Part of that was during the pandemic, and we saw different energy usage during the pandemic, of which you would expect. But then we also found that we didn't have the data that we were expecting even when we came out of it. So we had to dig into our data. And one of the things that we found, I would imagine you may not be that different, is that if you have multiple meters on a bill, on a Con Edison bill, then that Con Edison bill may or may not contribute all those meters to the building that you want it to. So you do have to dig in, and you do have to understand what power sources are going to your building and what energy is being consumed. So I offer you the advice of just taking a look at your data and making sure that it's correct, making sure that your square footage is correct. What's on the Department of Finance site may or may not be representative of what your building is, especially if you've done renovations over time, and you may need an architect to come in and to identify what your square footage is. So those all take time to resolve. We're in the far reaches of Brooklyn and Queens, and many of our buildings are on fossil fuels. Many of them are in oil. When they were built in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, there wasn't even natural gas available to them. So right now, because the coefficient associated with oil is the highest, if you will, some of our buildings, we're really looking to convert them right now, and seeing how that improves our numbers. And then this slide I share with our pastors in our parishes, building management needs to be smarter. So by that, we found as we walk through some of our buildings, especially the older ones, you'll see this like red little switch plate outside of a boiler room. And what we found is that some people just simply switched off and on the switch to turn off and on their heat, which is just like, oh no, there has to be smarter ways of doing it. But if people in your building like buildings particularly warm or particularly cool, that all impacts what usage you have. And if you have a building management system or if you have thermostatic controls, that negates that and allows the building to operate in the most optimal way. So just some kind of lessons learned that we had along the way. Now, if you don't mind, Martin, to go to the next slide. And these in particular, I wanted to build off of what Amy said. So these are some of the lessons that we learned. We had to verify and double check all our inputs and all of our results. We found, for example, 1 year a parish had sent us oil bills, and they sent us oil bills. We thought, okay, great. We just put in the oil bills, but the oil bills were for the wrong building. So if you have multiple buildings, you need to make sure you are actually getting the right stuff. And the parishes or the people that give you that information may not necessarily understand, no, I don't need it for the convent, or I don't need it for the smaller office building, but I need it for the bigger church building. So we also found things like our oil tanks we'd have one oil tank, but it would be for multiple buildings. That meant we had to pull in more building square footages, which generally would have helped our numbers as far as the benchmarking goes. But all that is just verify, and you got to double check your results, and you got to check both your input and your output. We did, as Lou had mentioned, we took advantage of utility energy efficiency programs, and they came in three major positions for us. First is the project, construction project rebates and steam traps. So we had a couple of building envelope projects go on, and we had a lot of steam trap work go on. And that, I would say most of those work that Lou had mentioned probably were in the last 3 years or so. We now have it as a process where we have a construction schedule coming up for work in the summer, and we take a look at what resources are available for us and get in ahead of the game, put our applications in and get those pre-inspected to see what we can do. And Lou and his team has been very good, because while we thought, well, we'd have a roof project, when they came in and they said, oh, you're doing some boiler work, you're doing some insulation work, we can include that as well too. So that has been positive for us in that regard. We've also taken advantage of the LED lighting program from Con Edison. And the third item is our energy audits. And we did, we have done quite a number of these. They provide a good baseline, but the Green Jobs Green New York is probably the most thorough audit we've seen. And it has been very, very helpful. It lists out all your buildings, but goes into really a good level of detail. And I think you mentioned this earlier, it does provide, it's a relatively minimal cost, but for the data that you get back out of it, it's really very beneficial. The next thing that I would say is that most of our buildings do meet the 2024 emissions levels. We really have to work on 2030 when we come up to things. So what we've done is now we've created a model where we take our existing data and our existing results, and then see if we were to switch fuels, or if we were to add heat pumps, or if we were to add insulation, what are the things that bring us some cost value back and help us meet the numbers out for 2030? So the most popular one right now is we're trying to convert and get most of our buildings off of oil if we can. But you do have to model, you do have to take a look at where you are today and what options that you have and what options get you there. I think one of the best questions that I got in one of the series that I do with our team is that a parish, a school was taking a look at individual units that go, individual heat pumps, split units, they call them, that go in individual classrooms. And they said, what do I do? Do I do that, or do I pay money, and get the boiler replaced and convert? They were looking at a convert. And the answer is, well, maybe both, maybe one versus the other. They may end up doing both, but I thought that was an excellent question to ask. You have to model where you're going to get the best benefits for the money that you put into it. So that's an exercise that you can play out with the numbers, and it's been very helpful for us. And I would also say, I didn't hear this on the presentation earlier, but because the city changed the coefficients about a year and a half ago, from building code to Energy Star Portfolio Manager, if you have a deficit in 2024, you have the opportunity to switch from Energy Star Portfolio Manager to go back to using the building code coefficients, and that might save you 2 years worth of penalties, of which you then can maybe invest in some building upgrades to get you to the 2026 levels and use that going forward. The last thing, and Amy talked about trusted partner, which I can't say enough about, but the last thing I want to mention is one of the existing struggles we have right now is doing LED lighting upgrades. And it's easy enough to do the lighting upgrades. Our parishes have been doing them for years where they just change a light bulb, but the city now requires you to make sure you're up to energy code 2020 of the Energy Conservation Code. And that requires some detail analysis. It also requires some documentation of what you've done in the past. So it's also due at the same time at the end of this year for any building that's over 25,000 square feet. It's number 10 in the prescriptive measures, but it also hits most of our schools. So we have about 50 churches that have to go through lighting upgrades, and we have about 30 schools that have to go through lighting upgrades. And it takes time to find the right vendors. And it's not just the utility programs there, because there's some controls involved. So you really have to focus in on what you need to do to get those upgrades up. And I'll turn it back over to Carlin in a moment, but one of the things that I found and my team found to be most helpful is we just go back and we reread the law and any pertinent DOB data that comes out, the guidelines, the filing guide that Aisha had mentioned came out in just December of 2023. So you've got to keep kind of checking back because there's resources available for you that might be very helpful. And Carla, I'll turn it back to you. I felt like I was talking very fast, but there's a lot of information to share. Oh, this is just, you'll get this, I guess, in your guideline. So this is another slide that I use with our parishes, and they appreciate having everything in one place. So these are the 13 prescriptive measures and examples of what they look like. Weatherization is pretty easier to caulk windows and that sort of thing, but not everybody knows what a steam trap looks like. So that's why we've shared this information here. And Carla, turn it back to you.
No, thank you so much. And I know that we've got some questions in the chat. I just want to highlight something that I mentioned when I went through my presentation, how important the role that you all play in helping to shape this energy policy, helping us understand what your particular circumstances are. So I think, Heidi, the complexity of what you've shown through all of the different properties that you have under the Diocese of Brooklyn was excellent, because again, everybody's circumstance is different. And that's why you have New York City Accelerator here to help you to understand what program, which pathway is best for you. You have National Grid as your utility partner with energy efficiency programs here to help you manage your footprint. So with that, we've got about 12 minutes. I'm going to turn it over to Martine, who will see if there are any questions in the chat that have not been addressed. And then I know there were some questions that were submitted in advance that the Brooklyn Borough President's Office can go through. So Martine?
Thank you, Carla. Well, I see one or two unanswered questions in the chat. So the first one person asks, if we address the prescriptive measures of Article 321, are we forever exempt from Local Law 97?
I can take that question. So I'm hesitant to say forever because I don't know what's going to happen, 10, 20 years down the line, but I will say for this compliance period, then you will be exempt. It's a one-time filing if you do choose to comply with Article 321 for Local Law 97.
We've asked that question of the Department of Buildings, and we've been told that you can expect to continue to file your Local Law 84. So you're not going to be totally done, but 97 should be okay, but they do expect you to file 84.
Thank you both. And everyone, there is a resource page here to please take screenshot of it so that you have it. Martine, any other questions that you saw in the chat?
Actually, Laura, thank you so much, has gone in and answered the other two. So please take a look at the chat if you had asked a question and see what Laura Pereno has said in there. I know we have 10 minutes left, and the Brooklyn Borough President's Office has received some questions through the registration. So would anyone from that team like to go through some of those questions?
I think most of the questions have been answered, but I'll just drop this one. One of the questions we got was, who receives credit for rooftop solar PV? Is it the owner of the property, owner of the solar array, or community solar subscriber?
I can take that one. Thanks for the question. So there are different incentive programs for solar. And the New York Sun program is a state program that the installer would take that rebate, and that reduces the upfront cost of the system itself. The new IRA tax incentive program called Direct Pay, that actually gets awarded to the tax exempt owner of the solar installation. So whoever owns that solar system. And the reason why I qualify that is if you enter into a power purchase agreement or other type of contract where someone else is installing a solar system on your building, but actually owns the equipment, you couldn't take advantage of that tax credit. The direct pay, though, if you own the system on your building, you take advantage of it, and it's equal to 30% of the entire system costs, including design work, the array itself, labor, and so on. It's a very attractive bonus.
DP, any other questions that we can go through that was submitted in advance?
Here's another one. How or where do we submit our compliance report to the city? How can we submit the compliance report to the city?
So you should be able to submit, it should be a similar system to like the local law 84 reports on Energy Star portfolio. I think Department of Buildings is just collaborating with Energy Star portfolio to see if it can manage the local law 97 reports as well. And that would be submitted by either a registered design professional, which is either like a licensed engineer or a licensed architect, or a retro commissioning agent.
Hey, sorry
And just
to
to
jump
add,
in, everyone. This is Chris from DOB. Actually, it's going to be through DOB now, and we're still working on the
okay.
guidance and mechanism through which that'll be submitted, but it'll be slightly different than the 84. It'll actually be through our DOB now system. So we're still getting the mechanics set up around that, but that's how it'll be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Christopher. And just to add to the new DOB's filing guide for Article 321 that Aisha had mentioned in her presentation, there are detailed instructions on each one of those measures, what's required, how to file, what to include in the report. So whoever you're working with to actually submit the report, please reference that guide.
Other questions, DPT?
I think the other questions have been answered through the presentation.
Okay. All right. I would like to give the floor a little bit to Reverend Dr. Valerie Dura, who is a partner with us in these webinars that we're doing with the Borough President's offices. And I asked her to share, because the Neighborhood Technical Assistance Center has been fantastic in being able to provide support. And this might be an area where, as I'm listening, it seems like you're going to need some resources. So Dr. Dura, maybe a little commercial moment about the Neighborhood Technical Assistance Center would be helpful. And I believe, hopefully, if we don't have your information on here, we'll make sure we get it to them as well.
Could we pause for 1 second? We got a question from
Sure.
First Evangelical Free. I can't see the rest of the name.
Mhm.
Is there any guidance on what the annual cost of these reports will be? So far, we're getting bids in the 10,000 and 24,000 range. Is that normal?
So
And
I have
is
seen similar prices for the reports. They are between like about 10,000 to 25,000 square feet. I mean, excuse me, 10,000 to $5,000. I think it also depends on the square footage of the building. We recommend getting 3 bids from different service providers. That way you can compare and contrast which bid you would like to go towards.
I would, thank you, Aisha. I would also add that, you know, you need to understand if that fee is just for filing the report or for some of the completion of the prescriptive measure upgrades as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and that's something that we do see a wide range. One thing that I wanted to add, and Heidi sort of alluded to this with energy audits. So we're also seeing a variety of different firms go out and complete a local law 97 audit, which is not necessarily the same as an ASHRAE level audit. And that's a service where they're going to make a site visit and determine what, if any of those prescriptive measures need to be completed, what remains, and so on. And that report won't have the detailed energy use analysis and recommendations and sort of big picture planning that an ASHRAE level 1, 2, or 3 audit would provide. And so we've seen a wide range of costs for these audits. And then for the work itself and the filing. And as Aisha mentioned, we do recommend that you get a couple of bids for this work so you can compare.
Yeah, I would add from a practical experience, we are finding less than that, but we are bidding it. And we find that the first thing that vendors offer us is an audit, not a filing. So we really have to dive in with them and understand what are you actually providing. You know, I think your advice is really right on. Does it include local law 88? Does it not? Will it file for you? Is it a 320 building or is it a 321 building? I mean, you really have to do that. And I think it's just better if you get multiple bids and feel who you're comfortable with, because some vendors will come in and they will say, I'll do all the work for you. You know, our philosophy has been, we'll have somebody do the audit and somebody do the filing, but you identify the work then. We don't want you to come in and identify projects for your company. We want you to come in and identify things that need to get done. And then we bid that job as well, too. Now, that said, we're a quarter of the way through 2024 and have a bit of work to do before the end of the year. But, you know, you do have to really understand what your situation is and what they're providing, because we went back and forth with a couple of different vendors to try and get some answers resolved. Also, I would say, just as an add-on, we found the guide to be tremendous. I mean, it's really very detailed, but the first report that came back to us had under number 1, which is temperature set points. This was for a church, had temperature set points, and the temperature set points were for HBD. Affordable housing. They were for affordable housing, and you had to heat the building from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., of which is not what we heat a church. So you really have to know what you're doing, and they can't just look at the guide without understanding what the building that they're looking for, because we pointed people to there, but the reference for there was for affordable housing, not for churches of worship or houses of worship. So you just really need to know and understand there's too much money involved to not really understand what's going on with your buildings and what pricing you're coming back at.
Well, we are almost at the end, Dr. Dara. If you have a 30-second, if you will, as I wrap it up, about NITEC, would you think helpful?
Intact
Intech.
is Intact Neighborhood Technical Assistance Clinic is a 30-year-old plus nonprofit organization that works to help organizations and nonprofits navigate the nonprofit landscape. And we also help organizations like National Grid to problem solve and to reach the audience in the community that they're interested in serving. I can also explain our work in this way, that the mayor has asked Intact to organize the first ever nonprofit day at Gracie Mansion on April the 30th, and we're excited to be able to lift up the work of nonprofits in New York City. I think this was a great gala and team presentation. It was a lot for to hear, to take in. I wish that we had a way to publicize, make it available on our website. And
You're on mute now, Dr. Dara.
as a way to put this on your website as an example of a communication between technical assistance providers and the local institutions, so that they can listen to it over and over again and almost get it. And we also need a list of not only contractors, but also vendors who could help smaller churches comply with filling out the application, whatever that is, the compliance form. Because you're not going to have sophisticated people the way we heard from the two testimonials, like you all had going on. These local churches and the community are going to need a lot of hand, and we're going to need completed forms. What a form should look like when it's completed, so that when we do assistance, we can say this is completed, a mock-up completed form, what it should look like, and we can help them in that way. But thank you. I think this was really wonderful. I had somewhere else to go. I decided to do everything I heard this from the front to the end, and I thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Valerie Dara. We'll make sure we get your information out to everyone. And so this concludes our webinar with the Brooklyn Borough President's Office on Local Law 97, Houses of Worship. I want to thank you again, Deputy Borough President Kim Council, for hosting this. Please let the Borough President Reynoso extend our appreciation. I want to thank my colleagues at National Grid for being a part of this, some behind the scenes, some on, like Lou Rizzo. I'd like to also thank New York City Accelerator. I'd like to thank both of our testimonials, really, really important information that you shared so that people can really understand actually how this looks and how this rolls out. So there'll be more coming. I'll turn it over to you, Deputy Borough President Kim Council, to have the final word.
Again, I think, a lot has been shared, and some of you may be on information overload, but we hope that this is at least giving you some of the information that you need to begin. A very, very special thank you to NYC Accelerator, to Laura and Aisha for all of the work that you all have been doing, to National Grid and your entire team for pulling this together, to Reverend Dr. Valerie Oliver Dara for all that you do with nonprofits all around the city, and to Amy and Heidi, thank you so much for sharing your testimony. The Bible tells us that we overcome, New Testament talks about how we overcome by the power of our testimony. So we thank you so much for sharing your stories and all that you have been through. And Christopher from DOB, we really appreciate you being on the call to talk to us about DOB now. Again, this is the beginning of a conversation. We have a lot more work to do, and we want everybody to know that you are not alone in this, that there is help. So thank you all for coming out today. God bless.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And Pastor Monroe's and Elijah, I want to also make sure that we didn't forget you. There was a lot of us that came together to make this happen.